My name is Mitch Fisher, and this is the Good Life Podcast.
My name's Jeff Mead. I grew up out in the Wood River area, and my parents had their own business, which is a welding repair shop. And I went to college down in Lincoln for mechanical engineering and had a mechanical engineering career for 30 some years. And during that time, I did some various entrepreneur things. I had a small vending business for a while, and then mostly real estate with some rental property. I did that on the side. Then I was able to retire from my career job, but I also now have a small business where I do infrared scanning of electrical systems. It's like a specialty maintenance item for commercial buildings.
Gotcha. So one of the things I really want to dive into is just like you being able to have your job, but also like having side income through real estate. So I'm curious because I feel like that's a hot topic right now. How did you start? Like, I feel like that's just the intimidating part for a lot of people. How did you start getting into real estate?
Well, the one thing is I was familiar with it just because my parents had done that as well. So I kind of grew up with that as a side business for them. And so I knew that it was a good potential and something to do, but you kind of have to have the skills to go along with it as well. So a little bit of carpentry, a little bit of plumbing, etc. So what I did was I just kept my eyes and ears open for one thing. And the first time, I was in it a couple times. The first time I'm not even sure how I heard about it, but a guy had it was a small mobile home park actually for sale, and I knew the guy. And so I talked to him, and then a lot of times these owners will want to carry sometimes they'll want to carry some of the loan, if you will. So then they continue to make an income and get a little interest as kind of a bonus for selling it as well, instead of taking the big capital gain hit. So that's what this guy was willing to do that. So that helped me out as a young man to get into the rental business. So I got into the rental business that time. And I actually kept that for a while, but I did get rid of it and took a break for a while. But then when the market went down in '08, the stock market crashed more or less for our lifetime. So decided to get back in some real assets, and I just sent out and you can look up who owns property on the assessor's website. So I did that. I'd see a fourplex around town or something like that, or a duplex, and I'd look up who the owner was and just send them a simple letter that I was interested and familiar with rental property. I was interested in buying if you were willing to sell. And people got back to me. A guy got back to me, and I bought an eightplex building from him, and he wanted to carry it, some of the financing. So that's how I got started. And then I just got some more responses and bought a few more. So
Dang. Okay. So what was it like then once you were able to like do that part, just like take that initial step of like, I'm going to get started. What was the process like of like those first few months and years of learning real estate? Like, what were some of the biggest surprises getting into it? Things that I guess you didn't expect.
well, one thing to keep in mind, and it can be a surprise for people, if you go for bank financing on the commercial properties, they're going to want 20% down. But like I just was saying, the first one I got, the eightplex, and even the one in prior, but let's just talk about the more modern ones, the guy carried it, and so I didn't have to have 20% down. But then once I was owner of that building, not 100% of course, I had a mortgage with him more or less. But once I had that established, then the banks looked at me a little bit different and were a little more flexible to allow a second property to be bought, for example. They were more willing or open to loan, I guess I should say, on a second property. And so that was kind of a little bit surprising.
Yeah. So like basically, if you're wanting to get started into this, the goal is to get that first property and be able to use that as like momentum to continuing to get more properties essentially.
Yeah, momentum, and you probably wouldn't have equity in it to use as collateral, but perhaps you would, depending on how long you'd had it and what the situation was, or maybe you did some sweat equity and Another thing a lot of people like to do, and I did a little bit, I did one, is a flip house. But there's a lot of interest in doing that, and so there's a lot of competition to get the house bought. That's one thing, to get the house bought. And I did buy a house on auction. It was a foreclosure auction and an online auction, and we were able to buy that reasonable enough. But then on those cases, you can't see you can't see go in the house or see what it's like for sure. You can just maybe look through the windows a little bit and
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And of course, you can monitor the outside and see what's been done and what hasn't been done. So you're taking a big
Interesting.
chance there, and you have to
Yeah.
have the money. You got to have the money lined up with a bank. You got to have her lined up with a bank to pay for it if you do the auction route. But people are doing. But the long story short is a lot of people want to do the flip houses, and there is potential to be made there. A lot of work though too.
Yeah.
And whether you're doing a flip house or whether you're doing rentals, there's always management. You can, like in a flip house, you can hire all the contracting done, and rather than do it yourself. And in the case of rental property, you can hire a management company to do the ins and outs and even to do the maintenance part. And then, of course, they get contractors or maybe they have people. But in both cases, then you're losing out on a lot of the potential that you're trying to make to get your extra income going. You're giving it to somebody else. But in either case, you are building equity yet. So in the long run, you're still ahead.
Yeah. So, tell me, like, where all did you have properties at? Like, I guess where's the majority of your business been around?
Well, the property part was all in Grand Island. And I talked to a kind of an old timer. There was a big real estate person actually in Grand Island. And I met with him one time just as a little bit of a mentoring thing. And he said, your best bet is just to do it in the town that you live in because you get opportunities maybe in these other towns, like maybe from here to Kearney or here to Lincoln or whatever. But it's just something makes it extra difficult to manage it and to take care of things, and then you are relying on a management service probably. And he just didn't recommend it, so we just stayed local and did things in Grand Island. And as far as the area town, it's just whatever you can get, whatever's
Yeah.
available, and where you get an opportunity, you got to decide.
Yeah. So how did like you did all this while working like a regular full-time job, is that correct? Mostly?
Yeah, that's correct. Now the advantage I had is I had a salaried position which and had some flexibility in the job. So I could take a long lunch if necessary, but then just work my 40 hour. It was a 40-hour base job, but it was salaried and a little bit of flexible hours because I was an engineer and so I was doing my own thing. I wasn't working at a certain station for 8 hours a day where that machine had to run or anything like that. So that was a great advantage, no doubt.
Yeah. Cuz I feel like yeah, so that's interesting to me cuz I do notice like a lot more people wanting to get into side hustles, specifically real estate. Like what's your recommendation for young people who want to do that, like work a full-time job and maybe get into real estate, or maybe that's some other side business? Like, was there anything you found helpful in being able to do that? Obviously having a flexible job is was probably the step number one, but are there any, like, was it difficult? I'm sure it was kind of difficult. I mean, you have to have some work ethic to do that.
Uh, yeah, the thing to keep in mind about any real estate, whether you're doing the flip or you're doing the rental property, is it's a job. It's a second job, and you got to be willing to deal with people's stuff, for lack of a better word that I can say here, because you're literally dealing with it when the sewer problem backs up, and then you're also dealing with just the personality issues and working with people, and people, perhaps you rent it to a couple but then they're divorcing, and then you're working through who's taking the apartment and that kind of thing. So it's a job and it takes hours and weekends, and you're on call. If you're going to do it to try to make a head, you're kind of on call 24 hours a day. And sometimes I went in the middle of the night to shut something off or check something, and
Yeah.
or people get locked out. They
Yeah.
lock themselves out, and you can make them get the you can make them get a locksmith, or if you're a good landlord, you can probably just go over there and let them in. And
Yeah.
sometimes landlords charge them, and I always had it in my lease that I was going to charge them, but I never did. So
Yeah. Hey,
I
that's
just got
nice.
them
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's like it's an attractive thing for a lot of people, but there is a lot of just like there's a lot of work involved, like as you're saying. Um, what made you like want to do that in the first place? Like, what was your ultimate goal? Was it just like you enjoyed it? You just wanted to find some extra income? Like, what kind of drove you to go down that path?
Well, what drove me the second time was the we had my wife and I had all our retirement basically in the stock market because we both worked for companies. So we had our 401ks. Well, then when the stock market really faltered there for a while in '08, we just decided to diversify by having real assets. And so we bought the properties as real assets as a hedge against the stock market volatility. But of course, real estate's a risk too. Uh, you got to, it has to be maintained. And during that time, we really didn't make a lot of money during the time of owning it, especially if you consider your time of working there. You don't really pay yourself anything. Where you're paying yourself is the equity, the appreciation and equity. The property's appreciating in value, so you could sell it for more than what you paid for it, and you're gaining equity on your mortgage. And so when you do sell it, you have that money. But appreciation is really probably the biggest one. Things go up. And so buy low, sell high. Just some of the basic items that you hear in different places. Just buy low, sell high. And that's what we were able to do.
So you were in real estate. Talk me through like your current business. Like, how did that come about? When did you know it was time to retire and go into this? And just tell me a little bit about kind of the business you're working on right now.
Well, I had always had it in mind to have my own business, and I even joined another engineer in an engineering company briefly, and that didn't pan out for me in that at that time. And so I was back working for a company, which is fine too. It's a great, secure and good benefits and all that. And so I wanted to be able to make a change and do something on my own again, retire early basically from my career job. And it just so happened that I had I was hiring this guy to do this service, the infrared scanning service, when I was at a couple different companies here locally. And he was a local guy as well, excuse me. And so I just always had always keep an open mind about what's out there and what's available. And I was always thinking about what kind of jobs I could do that you could kind of do on your own and just have your own business, but keep it small, not with a lot of employees and that kind of thing. So I just had the ideas every so often and thought about it, looked things up on the internet. But then I thought about what this guy was doing, and it was just a single man operation, which it could be more, but he had this specialized camera, and then he had his customers, and he'd do the scans and write up a report and provide that to them, and almost everybody is a repeat. It does it annually. It's an annual service. So anyway, flexible schedule. So I just mentioned to him one time. I said, "Hey, if you ever want to retire, let me know. I might be interested in buying your camera and your contact list and some training from you." And he, one year he said he was ready to retire. So I just so happened I was ready to retire from my career job. So we worked out a deal and I bought the little company and now I'm doing that. So
Wow. I love that, like, just like that forward thinking where that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't just for you, like, simply mentioning that in a conversation of just like the potential desire for that. Like, ha- do you have any tips and advice for people trying to create opportunities for themselves, um, even if it's not like a immediate opportunity, but something that happens down the road?
it's all about positioning. You got to position yourself. Uh, you have to have if you're thinking about buying something, you got to have already worked with the bank and have something lined up that yeah, we're willing to do this. And so you kind of have that idea, but it kind of boils down to another simple thing of it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, you see somebody doing something, and maybe you're not even that interested, but you don't know, maybe understand what they're doing, but it's a service, and you just say, "Hey, how's business going? How long you been doing this?" And then just let people talk. People love to talk about what they do and talk about themselves. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean people like to share. And so just ask open-ended questions to people, and you never know. Sometimes people will say, "Yeah, I'm thinking," and I don't remember, it was some other bit. Oh, the one of my ideas was appliance repair, because you can do that on your own. You just have a van, you could do it. You could go here and there and all that. And I talked to a guy about that, and I looked into appliance repair school, and I decided against it or whatever, but yeah, you got to spend some time to look into it, which is one of my sayings. And the saying is, you got to get past the ordinary to be extraordinary. Or if you're consumed with your ordinary life, just doing your 8 to 5 and going home and doing this, and maybe you got a family or whatever and doing this and that, you're just doing your ordinary life over and over. You're not going to get anywhere. You got to make time and effort to expand, to ask questions of these people, to look it up. You think about, oh, maybe appliance repair. Wonder what that takes. What's that cost? What's that take? Well, now we have the internet, so you can find that out in just a little while.
Yeah,
You can find out about that, and then you can let that process and decide down the road. Yeah, maybe I do want to pursue that, or I want to pursue whatever.
do you think, like, are there any unique business opportunities or just opportunities in general for like entrepreneurs, younger entrepreneurs in the Tri-City area? Like, what have you found to be cool, interesting, unique about Grand Island, Kearney, Hastings, the opportunities for young people who do want to like start businesses here or buy a business here and kind of keep their roots here, or put their roots down in the Central Nebraska?
Well, I'm probably not a good one to ask about that, but I know there are services around. First of all, it's a good place to live. We all know that, and there is a lot going on with there's plenty of going on with the development. That's what I'm trying to say. Development of different things, and that's more maybe construction related and all that. But with people coming to town too, there's all kinds of service availability. So I know that, like the Chamber of Commerce and places like that. And then I'm not really familiar with small business loans. I didn't go that route for anything. It wasn't necessary. And so as far as starting a brick and mortar place or even an online place, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I was just more of the traditional one-on-one relationships that worked for me to get the businesses going.
Definitely. Um, what's been what's been like the hardest lesson in all of this? Starting in real estate, buying a business, doing extraordinary things, as you mentioned, like uh obviously that always comes with a trade-off with like whether it's time or money or whatever it is. What do you feel like was like the hardest lesson that if you could like reiterate to someone else is like, watch out for this, or here's this huge hard difficult lesson or thing that you might go through, like what how would you explain that?
Well, as far as doing the real estate business, it was probably working with the people, and and not that that's bad. We had a lot of good tenants over the years, but what I'm getting to is a person, me, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes, whenever it takes it. You may be you may have worked all day long, either at your career job or maybe it's Saturday and you're remodeling one of the apartments or you're doing your flip house and you do that all day and you go home and at 10 o'clock at night somebody calls and says, my door won't lock, right now. My doorknob's broke, it won't lock. I can't lock it for the night or whatever. Oh, you go. What I did as a landlord is I'd go. I'd hop back in the car, go over there, fix it. And I didn't feel like it. I did not want to do it. I did not feel like doing it. But you're in a business where you turn around to pass the buck. There's nobody there. There is nobody. It's you. So you got to be willing to do it and just do it. And what's a big deal? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're tired. It's 10 miles away or whatever. Just
Yeah.
do it. Just
Yeah.
do it. Get it done.
Yeah. No, I love that. I feel like there's no escaping the work. At the end of the day, the work has to be done, and that's like everyone's looking for a shortcut for something. But oftentimes there isn't a shortcut, and that's why it's hard, and that's why not many people decide to do that. Um, what? So you might be a good person to ask this. What are some good startup or business ideas that you think are good in Nebraska or just in general? But if someone's like, I'm not an idea person, but like I want to start a company, kind of like, I mean, you knew you wanted to like own a company someday. Like, what are some good business ideas that you think are like sustainable, like would do well around here?
Well, there's there's a ton of things associated with construction and development. Now, whether that's saturated or not, I don't know. Years ago when they started putting storage units up, people started putting storage units up. This is kind of a sidebar story, but I looked at doing storage units, but then I thought, God, it's got to be saturated by now. There's so many storage units, it's got to be saturated. And then a year later, there'd be another big storage unit place. I'd look at it and think, man, maybe I should do storage units, but it's got to be enough now. But then a year later, there'd be more. And so they're still building them. So, but I never did get into storage units, but that has its own pitfalls, I guess you'd say. As far as good things to do, the service industry is always good. But the biggest problem, and these are some obvious things, but the problem with service industry is you're dependent upon hours. There's only so many billable hours, and there's only one of you. So you would have to get employees. So you have more billable hours. So you're billing out your customer at whatever, $100 an hour, and you're getting your employee with benefits and all that, whatever, $50 an hour. So then you're making $50 an hour off of somebody else. But you're providing them a van or tools or whatever. So you got to have employees. Well, that has its own issues. So then that brings you to the idea of making a product. I always thought that selling a product was where the real money was selling a product. But the problem is coming up with a product that everybody wants to buy, And then once you come up with it, you got to have engineering, you got to have regulatory, you got to have financing, and you got to have accounting, and you got to have manufacturing. You'd have to find somebody to build it, or you're going to buy a machine. Maybe you're going to buy a machine and build it, but then you're stuck maybe just building that. So, that's a real can of worms trying to get a product to sell. So, but it can be done, sure. Today, I should be asking you about doing what it takes to do the internet jobs and the influencing and all that stuff. That's new to me in my generation. And I'm learning some things from like you and from my son and daughters and people I know that are doing that kind of thing. And I'm like, wow, maybe I should, which I did think about doing like YouTube videos, but it seems like there's already a YouTube video on everything, but, and how do you get enough people to follow it type of thing, that, so.
No, that's a good point. I feel like because I've been coming back to this too. Just when you think, just like your storage unit example, just when you think there's already videos or content on something new is iterated on, or there's just like, it seems like there's just an abundance of content or internet ideas, but people just keep iterating. There's new ideas. Like I really do feel like the world and the internet is like abundant because there's always some niche software idea or niche piece of content, and at the end of the day, like we all are individuals who are all unique. So it's like if we're creating content, like it's naturally a unique piece of content, even if it's being on a topic that's already been talked about before. So it's like, and I was just reading like a Twitter thread about this too, like how it's more and more possible to start like a startup or a software company and have it be just run by one person. if you have the right idea and you utilize AI correctly. But it takes like, yeah, I feel like now is the best time to do hours and hours and hours of research on AI to figure out, okay, how do I use it so I can be like a one person business or whatever. But like, to your point, what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, like it's a whole new can of worms with a whole lot of possibility. I feel like there too, just getting the knowledge of all this all this AI stuff. Like, how do we use it to for good? But
I think another key point really, and there's an old saying about, and this is from a mental health standpoint, people compare their insides with everyone else's outsides. Everybody's going through different things, but the same is true for business, where you look at people's success and it looks so easy. It's like, oh man, that was a good idea, and that'd be so easy, and that guy's really going crazy, making a ton of money or whatever. But if you look at his actual P&L statement, he's got loans, he or she's got lease payments on the building, they got trucks, and they got a truck in the shop that's broke down, and they got employees that aren't coming to work. They got whatever you say. It's hard. It's hard to start a business, and it's hard to maintain it too. It's not, there's going to be no easy road. Just kind
yeah,
of back to the basic idea again. This is just not an easy road. It's
yep,
curvy and up and down.
yeah, yeah. It's so true, and it is. It's always everything looks better from the outside, and but everyone's got stuff they're dealing with. Businesses that there's always a lot more behind the scenes than. But this is just so much more true on social media too. Like, and it's just like it's made it more real. Like, it's so easy to compare and feel like you're behind, or it's a real challenge. But what would then be your biggest piece of advice? We'll leave with this biggest piece of advice to a young professional, young entrepreneur in Central Nebraska that wants to get ahead, wants to like work hard, wants to do good for their community. What would be the one thing you would tell that person?
I think the one thing, I have a similar quote to the one about the ordinary and extraordinary, and that's the fact that the secret to great success is simply striving to be above average. If you just do a little bit more than the next guy on a consistent basis, and go out of your way and do, like I say, the extraordinary versus the ordinary, just on a consistent basis, you're doing that, putting in a little bit of extra, you're going to have great success. And I think it also boils down to what we've already talked about, as far as don't be afraid to ask. Put yourself out there. You even in regular homes, maybe an elderly couple lives next door. Maybe you're renting a house and you got an elderly couple that has a house next door, and you help them out now and then, or help them with their groceries or whatever. Just say, hey, if you guys ever are thinking about selling your house, let me know. I might be interested. And there's no commitment. You're not committed, but you're
Right.
out there. You've put it out there. And then when the time comes, they think, oh, that neighbor young man and his wife, they're really nice. Let's give them a chance first before we talk to a realtor. Well, let's give them a chance first if they want to buy it. There you go.
Yeah.
You got a chance to buy a house.
So true. I know. I love that. I think that's so important. And it's so overlooked because it's like there's complicated strategies and things that we don't want to like look to or guides. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I feel like to some what you said is like be good, do good, and put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to ask. And it's just like things just kind of start to happen.
Create opportunity and put in some effort.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time to share kind of your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge. Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate this. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this, especially here in Central Nebraska. Just given that you've done a lot of good business here, so thank you
I'll
for your
I'll put
words of
in one. I got
advice.
to put in one more plug about something. I've been lucky that I've had a good partner, which my wife has been on board with everything, and we discuss it and bounce things off each other, and that's important too, to have that partner and to have that support and kind of do it as a team. And that's what we've been able to do to help with a lot of success.
Absolutely. Yeah. So true. Well, Jeff, thank you. Yeah, just really, really appreciate you taking the time and hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. We'll see you.
Bye.